Hey, everybody. Welcome to a rare, very rare Sunday afternoon broadcast here on the Comic Art Live channel. We've got something really fun today, something that I've been looking forward to for a while because there's three gentlemen in the green room right now that I've actually never met in person, and two of whom I've just met for the first time in the last 5 minutes. So let's not leave them hanging out and waiting for the show to get started. Let's get Roger Clark, Chris Kalaki, and Guy Mills into the chat and get you guys in the best spots in the format here today. Welcome to the show, everybody.
Hey, Bill, how are you? Thanks for having us.
I'm doing really well, and like I say, it's great to have you guys here. Guy Mills, we've emailed many times over the years, just like Roger Clark and I have as well, and we've never had the good fortune of getting to hang out together. So I'm glad we're doing this, and it's for we've got you guys. The first Carol Day book that you guys put together was phenomenal. I got a copy of it as well, and I can't tell you, it was amazing. It rivals any of the artist editions that that have been put out by a few publishers, and it's a true wonderful work that really highlights an artist whom I'm not very familiar with or wasn't familiar with until you guys started the project. I'd seen David Wright's works on CAF all really since CAF started, but I was never very familiar with his work at all. So this is it's a wonderful project. And before we even dive into the project, I felt like talking a little bit about David Wright, as an artist and a creator in his career would be a good place for us to start, because like Roger asked me earlier, how much do I know about Mr. Wright? And I don't know a whole lot. So where do we begin?
I think we start with Roger. I mean, I mentioned to you before you jumped on, Roger's had the relationship with the Wright family that goes back almost 20 years, back to the kind of, and we would love to get into that, like how the art kind of made its way over here. Mm-hmm. He's had that relationship with them, and therefore kind of has the deepest knowledge amongst our team of David Wright, generally as an artist before he came to Carol Day. So Roger, you're probably, you're certainly the most well-versed person on our squad with regards to David Wright and the family in particular. Maybe you start that one.
I'll try not to misrepresent him too much. Probably everybody knows he was born in 1912. The key thing about it, I think, is that he came from a famous artistic family in the UK. His father, I believe it was his father and grandfather, both were members of the Royal Academy. And his father died when he was young. He ended up having a fairly tough childhood, but he was interested in art from an early age and pursued it. He really got started at just doing illustrations and stuff during in the interwar period between World War I and World War II. And in World War II, when he started doing his pinups for the sketch, that was when he really hit massive popularity. He was the most popular pin artist in the UK during that period. And, you still see in photographs of wartime photographs and so forth, his pinups in the army barracks and so forth. Then he also, during that time, he was also doing some comic book work, although I haven't seen a lot of it, frankly, and I haven't seen any originals. I don't know if anybody has, to tell the truth. Once the war was over, he migrated more towards comic strips. And although he did continue doing his illustration commissions and illustration work at the same time he was doing comic strips. But I think it was Chris points out in an article that he did that Wright was a really unusual guy for going from a massively successful commercial career doing pinups and illustration art and moving into newspaper art and newspaper strips. In the US anyways, the traditional trajectory is any newspaper artist, strip artist wanted to get out of it during that period. They wanted to get into real art and do real illustration. And Wright was pretty exceptional for going the other direction. I have no idea why. I've never had a chance to talk to the family about that and try to understand what precipitated that sort of change of direction. But that was when he came up with Carol Day, and he did a couple of strips for the weekly UK magazine Titbits. one of which is Judy, and the other one was Joe. They're very similar strips. But Carol Day stayed his main emphasis from the mid 50s until his death in '67. He died unexpectedly in '67 from an undiagnosed brain aneurysm. As Patrick Wright told me once, it was I don't know if people are aware of this, but David Wright, he was an assiduous collector of tear sheets, and every day when he'd get the paper, according to Patrick Wright, he would clip out the episode of Carol Day, and he would paste it in his scrapbook. And I actually have a dozen of his scrapbooks. They're incredibly cool. But according to Patrick Wright, anyways, he pasted this strip of, I think it was 3350, into his scrapbook one evening and passed away an hour later. And that was the end. That was basically the end of the Carol Day strip. The strip was taken over by Kenneth Innes, and he did it until 1972. And if you read it, it's a fun cultural experience, but it's an absolutely horrible strip. And in my opinion, he destroys everything that was good that David Wright had done with the character in the comic strip. So let's say it's a fun cultural experience, but it's not good comics.
That's unfortunate.
Anything to add?
No, I'd say, the only thing I'd say is it's interesting. There are a good kind of indicator of just David Wright as an artist and a creator. There's like these two streams that Roger references. So the gentleman who does all the work in the creation of our books, a guy named Ryan Graff, who I think you know, Bill, he's been deeply enmeshed in the creation of the current book that we're getting to market next, Jack Slingsby. And it was funny. He's been so enthused about what he sees. We're talking the other day, and he's like, this guy's art's amazing. Like, we got to do something like on him as an artist. And it's like, well, there have actually been books done on him as an artist, as a pinup artist and as an illustrator. Roger was just sharing something with me this morning that was fascinating. Someone reached out to him with a coffee mug that we think was produced sometime in like the 1970s, 70s, and 1980s that featured David Wright's pinup art, right? So there's this whole kind of comic strip and comic art side. But from a commercial standpoint, and what his reputation was and what he was known for in the World War II era, there's a whole other side of this stuff that we're trying to kind of capture and create and kind of just make sure that there's still kind of a history of who he was and what he created. So there's people who don't even, I think, know him on either side. And I think one of the fun things that we've been able to do is link those two things, whether that be through, Instagram feeds and Facebook pages and things of that nature, but trying to make sure that people understand that he followed a really interesting route, of big success first commercially, and then went into this comic strip. And I think largely, Carol Day was all the different things that he was trying. He really hit on a lot of fascinating things that were going on culturally, whether intentionally or accidentally, after World War II, for women in particular, as they were starting to pursue careers independently. And there was that blossoming of women in fashion and career in post-World War II London. So yeah, we're kind of geeks about it, obviously. So we can get too deep into the weeds and sound super nerdy, which is super easy. But big fans, obviously.
Exactly, and I would assume the family's been very supportive of the project since its inception. I mean, with the first book, when did that actually get started? I mean, it came out about a year ago, right? I'm kind of probably messing up my dates here, but how long did it take to kind of get to that point where you're able to put the first book together? Because it seems like the momentum's there that, you just rolled right into doing a second book.
Yeah. That book came out, I think, earlier this year is when it hit the market. Okay. And we had probably been working on that. I would say first conversation that I had with Roger was about 2 years prior. And to be clear, the whole book thing, it comes out of Roger. So I was a collector, and when COVID hits, I start, everybody's locked in their basement, and I wanted to put this story together. You can't do that kind of stuff in our world unless Roger's helping you, because he kind of just knows where a lot of this stuff is across the globe and has relationships everywhere. So we talk all the time, and I just asked him for his help. And so he jumped on it, and he was, his usual self in terms of offering to help me. And he said, look, in the grand scheme of things, if we actually successfully pull this stuff together, he's like, would you have any interest in publishing a book? Which is something that I think he's always wanted to do and he can speak more to. So that was right out of the gate, early 20, as we're all going home for COVID, that it was really kind of a collecting itch for me that he converted into, I'll help you, but if we're successful, let's publish a book about it. And oh, by the way, I think I got a third guy that we got to bring into it, Guy Mills, which happened almost instantaneously. And that's when it was all born. That's when it was all born. And
So,
then the last thing I would add is I think when you asked about that momentum, so looking for the strips for that first book, you know, it just was like an explosion of networking and connectivity. And I think I've mentioned to you in the past how much people really kind of embraced that and were so helpful. So even though the output from that initial effort was the first book, Lance Hallam, there was a tremendous amount of other scans, other information, other connections to all corners of the globe, you know, Asia, Europe, you name it. And so, you know, when we got done with Lance Hallam, our biggest concern was there was so much momentum that had been built. You know, what do we do with that? And we made the decision to just absolutely fire away into the next book and keep going. And quite frankly, as we're now getting to the point of, you know, we have another 2 weeks that we're having pre-orders available for Jack Slingsby. We just had this conversation as a team yesterday. I mean, that momentum just kind of continues to build. Now, we all have other things that are going on in life, and so book publishing isn't our primary focus, although it definitely feels like it sometimes. But there's a lot of fun to it, right? And as we kind of feel like the artist and his creation is getting elevated in the world, sometimes to the good, sometimes to the bad, if you're a collector of this stuff, it's just fun to continue to dive into it, Bill, and keep putting out, you know, what we think are really fun things from a collector standpoint that we're proud to be putting out there in the way of highlighting his art, who he was, his creation, you name it. And that really kind of loops back, I think, Roger, to the family and what the family thinks about that, and the support that they've given us over the course of time.
So I assume when they got their copy of of Lance Hallam, they were pretty impressed and happy with the final product.
They gave us some good feedback.
Yeah.
But you know, but not a lot, I would say. I think I got a couple of emails from Paul Wright about it. He was very pleased with it, obviously, but frankly, I'm not gotten the impression that the family particularly cares all that much about Carol Day. They like it, David Wright's legacy and all that sort of thing, but they're not. It's not like a lot of, you know, you see a lot of families, you know, for instance, Loneron's family for Friday Foster art right now. You know, his son, I think it's his son, is trying to buy the art, and you don't see that with the David Wright estate. They've been happy to get their David Wright's art out into the world and into collectors' hands.
And they have a much broader perspective on him, right? Like, you know, as Roger said, the family is a series of artists, series of creators. And so this is kind of one aspect, one facet, basically, of a much more complicated kind of stone from their perspective. So,
well, and I'd also say that the person you interfaced with for a long time, Roger, was Patrick, right? And it was Patrick Wright, correct? And
correct.
Unfortunately, he passed away before he could see the book. He was aware, and I think we got the permission to do that first book from him, but he didn't get to see it. So then it got, you know, then Paul got involved. And so I think Patrick may have slightly been a little bit more invested in the whole thing. And then Paul's kind of inherited it, been very extremely supportive of what we're trying to do. So,
like you said, David's father was an artist. I think David got his start working in the studio of his father. So, you know, it's an artistic family. They have a much broader legacy than just a strip that was part of, you know, David's career for 12 years. But so I can understand that when they probably look at it, they see a much bigger picture with, you know, as a family, and that's wonderful. You know, I mean, that's you don't have too many familial, you know, legacies like that in the creative world. So that's pretty pretty fun to even know that it's out there. But I would assume through the process of working on Lantallum, you met a lot of collectors that you had never spoken to before or even knew existed, that that were fans of David Wright's work as well.
I think it was more, we didn't run into all that many people we didn't know about. We did run into some, but the thing is that we pretty much have good visibility of most of the Carroll Day and David Wright, well, not David Wright collectors, but of Carroll Day collectors around the world. Because I've been, for the last 15 years, I've been selling the Carroll Day art. And since I was almost the sole source for it for that entire period, I had sold somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 the originals during that period. And so we had a pretty good database or pretty good records of who the Carroll Day collectors are. Although we did run into Chris particularly found a bunch of them in the UK that we were unaware of, who contributed scans and art.
Yeah, what I'd say the main thing that got filled in, Bill, was, so Roger, maybe you should talk about this after I mention this. So there's a ton that we have from when Roger brought, Roger, what was like 2,000 plus strips over kind of in one big move. So from that point on, when he starts making a market in the art, we have a lot of information, and we had to go back and do some reconstruction of eBay transactions and things of that nature to kind of fine tune some things, especially with some things that he didn't have full visibility in terms of where it ended up. So lots of information, lots of record, lots of data from there. What was really fascinating was to understand how some of the art moved before it got to that point where Roger made that massive lift from the UK over to the United States. Like really fascinating, like little niche stuff that isn't captured anywhere. I mean, we've got kind of a recording of it, if you will, from just emails and things of that nature. But like the whole movement in and around like certain kind of comic shops, collecting communities, where one was kind of given as a gift and kind of put on the wall and it's never been seen again. And there's a couple that, I think, Roger, even for you, we just had no idea where they were. And so, and there's all sorts of folks who are like, look, I love what you guys are doing. I give you scans all day long, but the stuff is staying on my wall, wall kind of stuff. It was, I think that was the most interesting part of all of that networking and all that connectivity was we have a great visibility from when it gets to Roger, given his connection with the family. But before that, it was really fascinating. Like there were two major, kind of moments where stuff went into the market basically through some local people in the UK and then went out into the collector universe. And there's some big, to use that term in the collecting community, some big honey holes that are sitting in collectors' hands that go back to like, God, I mean, you want to talk about like ground zero of when this stuff started to move. And then and that was just kind of fun and cool. And then it gets to Roger eventually. But Roger, I mean, the reason why this market even exists and there's this knowledge in the marketplace, I'm not so sure what would have happened if Roger, you had not done what you had done so many years ago, and that massive kind of movement from effectively the family to over here, and then really endeavoring to kind of get this stuff out, get the art in collectors' hands. I'm not so sure I could have done what he had done because letting go of this stuff is really, really, really difficult, especially these days with what we've done in terms of impacting the market for it. But Roger, you should probably I think you've written about it, but I don't know if it's very broadly known about that massive movement of like that big body of art across the ocean.
Yeah, that's worth talking about. Probably several people asked us to talk about what the origin story of sort of the Carroll Day collection in the U.S. Let me see. Phase one is right about the time that CAF started, Bill. 2002, David Roach did his article in Comic Journal, or Comic Book Artist, I can't remember which one, about the best artist you don't know. And I had read that article, and of course, I was one of the people he was talking to because I had no idea who the artist was. But I liked the examples he put in there, so I started looking, and I bought a couple on eBay at that time. And I had those, and that was all fine. I remember, I showed them to my wife at the time and said, "Hey, aren't these great? Don't you just love these?" And blah, blah, blah. Like any good comic collector's wife, you know, she has sort of a bit of an interest, but it's not deep, you might say. So her response was, well, yeah, that's really pretty. What's this strip about? And I had to say, I have no idea. And I don't think anybody else does either, because nobody in the US has ever seen it. Nobody's ever read it. So that was kind of the end of that story. And so about 5 years go by, and then out of the blue, I get an email from Patrick Wright. And he says, hi, you know, I can't remember the exact words, but it's sort of like, hi, I'm Patrick Wright. And I've been told by a comic strip art collector, Thomas Ward, that you might be interested in buying some Carol Day art. And, you know, that was like a nuclear blast that went off. I mean, I don't know how many of you guys know Tom Ward, but he is probably one of the best detectives in our hobby. And he's also got one of the best eyes in our hobby. So, you know, sometime around 2006, he had gotten kind of interested in Carol Day, and he had researched where all the original art was. And about 95% of it was sitting at the University of Kent. And I don't really know how this happened, but Patrick Wright was just in the process of getting the art returned to him from the University of Kent when Tom Ward tracked him down and basically, you know, made the connection for Patrick to sell some art. So Tom started buying some art from Patrick and a couple other collectors that Doug Beekman was one, and I think there might have been one other that Tom was putting Patrick in touch with. So then, you know, at that time, Patrick was selling the art in basically 100 strip lots. So you could buy 100 strips. His choice. You couldn't pick them. But of course, that really matters since nobody had ever seen any tear sheets or anything. You didn't know what you wanted. Mm-hmm. So I did that for a few times. There were 3 or 4 lots of those that I bought, and that took a little bit of a while. Patrick was pretty sick. He'd had some surgery, and you know, it was throat cancer, I believe, but he was sick and recovering. So things were taking a really long time. And eventually, after I had 3 or 4 lots of 100, I was looking at them, and, you know, I think it had been like 6 months or so had gone by. And I'm sitting there thinking, shit, man, this stuff is taking way too long. Somebody else is going to come along and get all this art. So I decided I better just take lead and told Patrick, you know, I'm tired of this. I just want to buy it all. What can we do? And, you know, he was very nice about it, very responsive. He said, okay, fine, let's do it. So we agreed on a price. A couple weeks later, I send him off a big check. A month goes by, I don't hear anything. A couple months go by, I don't hear anything. I'm sitting in my chair with my head in my hands thinking, oh shit, I just wrecked my retirement. And this guy, he's off in, you know, Monaco or something at the gambling tables. Finally, I got to the point where I had to track it down. So I got a hold of Patrick through his wife. I never did get a chance to talk to Patrick about it. I finally dug out his phone number, which I'd never had. That took some detective work. Talked to his wife. His wife was, you know, well, Patrick can't talk to you, but I'll give you a message. Then about another week later, I get this email from Patrick that says, okay, I'm sorry I haven't been communicating, but I've got your check. I've got the art all packed. It's on the way. And then about a week later, 14 crates of art show up on my doorstep. It was unbelievable. At the time, we were in a little 2-bedroom duplex in town while we were building our house, and it was full of all crap. So basically these 15 cases of art all had to go in the garage. I spent the next, 2 or 3 months just sorting them because Patrick had them. They were not in any kind of order whatsoever. So you had to go through each box and make piles. And, you know, fortunately the strips were numbered, so I could sort them all that way. Then I spent about the next 6 months just every day, or not 6 months, that's an exaggeration, but some period of time every day just reading another story. Every day I just read a new story. I did all that. Then I spent about 6 months scanning all the art. That was an enormous task and took, you know, at least hundreds, if not thousands of hours. Because one of my goals was I wanted to make more or less archival scans of all this art, since I figured it was going to get scattered to the winds and nobody would be able to put it back together again. I kind of had in mind that at some point, somebody someday, I didn't think it was going to be me, but I thought somebody someday might want to use all these scans and stuff and do a book or do some books and reprint this strip because it's worth it. So I spent a lot of time scanning all the art. That took about 6 months. Then finally, at the point where I had all the art scanned, I had it all sorted and stored away. And then I sat there, and the big puzzle was, okay, now what do I do? Do I sit on a pile of David Wright art for the rest of my life that nobody else gets to see? Or do I start selling it, even though it's painful, incredibly painful? Eventually, I came down on the side of the Wright family. You know, their philosophy was to get the art out to collectors and get it into the universe. So I decided I should do the same thing, even though it hurts. So that was when I started selling it. We started up a website, and my wife did the website for us, and we started that up, and just started regularly selling for the next however many years. And now my personal Carol Day art is basically gone. I think I have 30 or 40 originals left. And that's out of, I haven't calculated it recently, but at one point I had calculated that of the 3,300 existing David Wright Carol Days, I had owned and sold over 2,800 of them.
Amazing.
So that was a lot.
That's kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah, I mean, the idea that the family still had the art 40 years later when you made the purchase, that much of it is pretty remarkable. That someone didn't come along and purchase it before that, or that it hadn't been lost. I mean, that's a long time to sit in an attic in a crate or wherever they had it and still be available to you. But so it was a pretty big responsibility at the end of the day for you to have all of that art and to start selling it. I mean, you're basically creating a market for the art and finding the right place to start back in 2008. So, 15 years ago or more. And, to the point now where you only have 30 or 40 strips left for yourself. I mean, that in and of itself is a major responsibility, because you just don't want to you don't want to do what they did, selling them in lots of 100 at a discount. I mean, I think you did a really great job. I mean, you look at the market today, the book certainly has helped that. I mean, anybody that wants to pick up a Carol Day strip is going to spend at least $1,500 on it. And I'm sure that's not anywhere near where you started selling them, in 2008. So that's a testament to the care that you put into having that much art and nurturing that market, which is incredibly important for our hobby to make sure that, works like that are treasured and are valued, properly. And I think that, that's really where that market should be, given the quality of the work. And in a weird way, that the fact that it's, when you stumble onto David Wright's work, you really are discovering something that you didn't know anything about, a lot like you guys have already said. And it's a remarkable experience today in collecting when you can come across an illustrator that you really didn't even know their name, much less any of the strips that they had done. And that's what I think makes David Wright's work be very special to the collecting community that's discovering them, since you've been doing the work with the Lance Allen book and now Slingsby.
And this is why it's Roger's such a huge part of the story, because think about, we're all collectors, right? So imagine if that art didn't flow through him, right? Mm-hmm. So all of that scanning and cataloging and archiving and preservation. I mean, Roger's an amazing record keeper. And so I think about how poor of a job I do on a much smaller base of collection. I can hardly keep track of the sliver of Carol Day art that I have in comparison to him. But if it doesn't go through him, like this conversation never happens. And all of this kind of archive, most of the scans out in the world come from Roger, right? When people bought art and they would ask Roger, do you have a scan? And he would forward along, So if that doesn't happen, this whole base of just kind of capturing the art in that moment really probably never happens. And who knows where we are today, but it would look very different. It would look very different, which just goes back to some of the questions you were asking, Bill, in terms of there's such a foundation, right? Both in terms of the art, where it was, and the collecting universe that we've had to play in to create the books. But none of it happens if that art doesn't flow through him. I think about that all the time. It really kind of freaks me out in some respects, right? Because when you have everything flowing through one person, you start to think about like, well, what if it had been somebody else, or what if he made a different decision, or what if he just was like, it's all beautiful and I want to keep it. Think about like how much of a loss that would be in our world, but he put it out in the world. And because the thing that you always think about as a collector is, would I have done that?
Right.
About the market, when we started selling Carol Day art, quite often I take the lesser strips and put them in lots of 6 of them for $500. And I probably get about 30 to 40% sell through right off those lots. It was amazing how few people were interested in it, in the art, at even that price. And now, things have changed and people are more appreciative and more stories are out there, more awareness of it. And, not unusual to see one hitting multiple thousands of dollars.
Yeah, Roger doesn't like to do the math on when he had all that art. It's bad.
I refuse to do that math.
It's really bad math. It's really bad math. So.
It could be that in the end, what really wrecked my retirement was not keeping the art and selling it now.
Well, if you could go back in a time machine, but you think back to it though, with the fact that Patrick got the artwork back, and like you mentioned that he didn't even get to see the Lance Allen book finished. I mean, if the work hadn't made its way to you, Roger, who knows what would have happened at that point. So, again, it's a remarkable story that the opportunity came about. And I mean, I love stories like this because these are things that happen by, in many cases, it's collectors that help salvage, a artist's legacy in this regard. And I think it's a wonderful thing. It's because of our appreciation that artist's legacy lives on. Again, we've got the 3 of you here putting this, monumental work into now your second book to preserve that legacy, and it's because we were collectors first. And I think that's great. I think in our hobby there is a lot more projects like this that I hope are gestating and come out for other creators too, because it's needed, it's noble, and it needs to be done.
Yeah, no, appreciate that. And the hobby in general, right? Like as the price of poker is going up in almost every category of it. And as this stuff sits in a lot of individual collections, Scott's obviously done a great job of this at IDW in terms of getting folks to kind of share and hopefully just kind of make sure that the stuff gets kind of captured and put in a format that makes it more public and more broad. That's the other asset that we had. I mean, so there's what Roger chose to do, but then Roger had a great name in our market, right? So all that goodwill, when I would go and network with people, first thing I told them was I was working with Roger and with Guy, right? And it was like, oh, Roger, I know Roger. I bought art from Roger. What his website, his sales, his whatever. And so all that goodwill, kind of also was an opening of doors everywhere. So you mix it all together. It's a pretty unique, interesting group that we were able to kind of play with to get to where we are. So. Because, at the end of the day, I'm not so sure, Roger, going back to some of our earliest conversations, or Guy, what we even thought the probability of getting a book to market was, in terms of, we only had, for Hallam as an example, we had 24 of the actual strips. We wanted to get them if we could, just for preservation purposes and the quality of scans. We had 24 of the 88. So we had a lot of work to do. And, mean, in 2 years to have tracked down all across the world, we got to 72 actual strips, and then we all got to 84, I'm sorry, from Hallam. It just speaks volumes about dealing from a very firm kind of foundation. It certainly wasn't a cold start by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, people all over the place were really helpful, getting us scans and giving us leads and all kinds of tips and stuff. It was a great experience in that regard. We get a lot. There's a lot of. We like to complain a lot about dealers and complain a lot about fellow collectors, and everybody does that. But I can tell you, these projects that we've been doing, collectors have just been magnificent.
Yeah, amen. Amen. I saw Kazra actually ask a question about, in an ideal world, how many of these large format, high production David Wright volumes could you all see making? It's actually a great question. We were just talking about it as a team yesterday, because we're just about done with the production of Slingsby. Like I mentioned, pre-orders will be done in the next 2 weeks. And as we've been doing Slingsby, again, we've got all this other stuff going on in the background, Bill, for the next series of volumes. And it's a bit of a balancing act of like trying to make sure that from a quality of story, from a diversity of kind of like exposing people to images and storylines and things of that nature. But I would say off the top of my head, relative to, and we think of it in terms of scans, right? Like how many high quality scans, because our goal is always to make sure that we put a book out that has, we would like Hallam to be on the low end of 81 out of 84 as an example of what we ended up kind of putting out in the market. Slingsby will be the full 115 strips. We had the actual art. But I would say there's at least like another, and Roger and Guy, correct me if I'm wrong on this, we have visibility on, at least today, with the strips and the scans that we have, probably like another at least 6 to 7 books if we wanted to. Is that wrong? You guys should fact check me on that. I tend to be the optimist of the group.
It's very close.
Yeah. From the practical side, I would say, the answer to Kazra's question is more, we can see doing as many as we have to do. These are massively money losing projects, and we haven't made people given it much visibility, but fundamentally this is our gift back to the hobby. But we are going to run out of money eventually, and I don't know. So we don't know how long this is going to last, really.
Yeah. We each kind of have a don't ask, don't tell policy at home in terms of what we're doing here. So.
Yeah, I publish an art annual. I know all about the profitability of books like that. It's it has to be a labor of love, or it's generally not worth it. I mean, you don't hit major home runs, grand slams with books, in general. You have to do a lot volume, and so clearly that's not what you guys are doing here. A book a year, every 2 years, something like that. It's you have to love what you're doing, and you have to have a supportive spouse that doesn't know exactly how much time you're spending on it. I get you over there too. Yeah, so Will K, that was a funny reminder where he says those old New Year's Day sales that Roger would have. That's funny. I do remember that back from the Comic Art L days of getting those mailings and Roger promoting those sales. It's funny. I hadn't thought about that in a while, but that just tells you how long we've been in the hobby.
Everybody's getting old. That's how I met Roger. It was through one of those New Year's Day sales, and so it was before I was even collecting Carol Day art that I knew Roger, and it was through his New Year's sales. Everybody look forward to that.
Yeah, those were magical.
I mean, I have a lot of other art in my collection from Roger's New Year's Day.
Definitely.
So I saw Matt from Pop Sequentialism. I think he was asking about the image behind you, Chris, wondering if that was like an oil pastel. I think I have a different image of it here, but what's the reference for that piece?
So this is the back cover of Jack Slingsby. So this is another, it's clearly Carol Day. It's Carol Day in, oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the Italian city. She's in Florence, I believe, right, Roger?
Yeah.
And so this is it's a pastel piece. It's interesting with David. You know, we have a lot of art outside of his strip art in our personal collections, and God, there are just times when he kind of killed it on the piece, but the materials that he was using, it was almost like, you know, he certainly wasn't thinking of it kind of beyond whatever production it was going to be used for. This is on almost like a piece of cardboard paper or construction paper, like when you were a kid in kindergarten, what they would have you drawn with crayons. So I recently just had this, there's a group here in Chicago that I do a lot of work with that has helped us with scanning and color matching. Oppenheimer had this piece preserved because it was a little bit, you know, delicate and crumbly on some of the edges. But it's a beautiful pastel piece that he created. And I don't know if it's specifically Jack Slingsby, but it has such a romantic and lovely kind of mature image to it that we chose to use it for the back cover of the book. So that's why I chose to put it behind me today. And it's just kind of a really lovely kind of romantic image of her with a paramour in Florence. Good eye.
Yeah, no, it's gorgeous. And do you have a lot of illustrations outside of the strip from David? I mean, all three of you, I guess that's a question for you.
Roger and Guy, you're probably the best guys to answer. I mean, the answer is we do, but I would say not nearly the magnitude, I think, of the strip art.
Right. I've owned a few pieces, but Roger and Chris probably have collected more of it. I've collected a few pieces, and I've helped them catalog some collections and things like that. But Roger and Chris, I think, can speak more to the variety of things they've seen and actually held in hand.
One of the side effects of the Lance Howell project that was really nice was that we had a chance to buy a couple of collections of David Wright art. And so, of course, we did. So there's, I guess, I don't know, we each have, I don't know, some number of, a couple dozen other pieces that outside of Carol Day art. I have less, I think, because I've started selling mine. But, you know, one of the questions somebody asked related to that was how rare really is David Wright art in the market? And, you know, is it really scarce? It seems to be. And is that real? And I guess, you know, I was thinking about that a little bit. Obviously, it seems like Carol Day art is obviously not rare. I mean, I've sold thousands of them, and I think probably every Carol Day original still exists. There might have been a couple that got destroyed, and I've seen a couple that are in really bad shape. I've seen several that way, but probably just about all of those exist. The problem with the Carol Day art is that it is, and with Wright art in general, I think as a collector, is that now that it's all out in the world, it's so darn sticky. Nobody gives it up. Guy and Chris both have examples that I really want back, and I'm not going to get them.
Back at you, Roger.
There's some other, you know, there's some other collectors out there, other guys out there. I've sold a lot. There were some guys that ended up buying, you know, dozens, if not hundreds, of Carol Days when I was selling them over the years. And you wonder, you know, where are they in the market? They're not there. You go look for Carol Day art, and you're going to find, you know, you'll see 4 or 5, maybe 10 if you're really lucky. But, you know, you won't see what you should see. You should see 100, you know. But like I say, that my point there is just that Carol Day art is somewhat scarce in the market because it's so sticky. People just don't give it up. I think they like it, they keep it, and you know, maybe it's for aesthetic reasons, maybe it's because the market's moved a lot in the last couple of years, and they think, well, they're gonna make good money when they do get rid of it. The other art of Wright's, you know, his illustration art, his pinup art, is sort of the opposite story. It's not seen very often. And to a certain extent, from what I've been able to find out, nobody even knows if it still exists. You know, I've heard rumors and stories, like there's a story that sometime I think it was either in the 50s or 60s, a wealthy Egyptian bought out an entire show of David Wright's pinups. And I don't know if that's urban legend or true. I've never been able to find a reference to that show or anything like that. but his pinup art and his illustration art is just not very available. And again, I don't know about that. I don't know if that's because it's not extant anymore, if it's all been destroyed or lost, or it's like the Carol Day art, it's sticky and people are just keeping it.
But I think it's a much smaller unit. I would say this, to our knowledge, having collected both his commercial illustration pinup art and then the comic art, the strip art, that is a much smaller. His work prior to Carol Day, that body of work, to our knowledge, is much smaller than the strip population.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, and I would tell you too, Bill. He mentioned some of these collections that we've gotten an opportunity with. Eventually, that'll be in my CAF gallery. We've gone through, in similar fashion to Roger, a whole kind of restoration, preservation. Trying to make sure that eventually all this stuff moves away from you to somebody else. We're just stewards of it for a period of time, that has been properly kind of taken care of and preserved. But I will tell you, I mean, his pinup work is some of the most unbelievably beautiful art that you're going to see, regardless of medium. They're really striking, really stunning. And you can kind of see, where all that kind of baseline skill comes in terms of the delicacy of his work prior to creating Carol Day, and why you see it in black and white. I mean, there's things that he's doing when you look at the live boards, underneath on some of the blacks, like where he fully fleshed things out and then put blacks over it. And you're like, good Lord, like you can see the delicate kind of features of like an eyelash and an eye and how it's cast down underneath a black wash.
Yeah.
It's really, really, Guy knows this well. He sees some of these things better than I.
Well, it made me think of the one in particular, 147 in Lance Hallam. It's a scene. There's a panel with Carol and Lance in a car, and they're in deep shadow. But you can, if you look closely, it looks like it's all black, but actually you can see the outline of her legs. He drew everything in outline and delineated everything and then covered it in black. That's one that always sticks with me. For those of you who have access to the book, or in 147, you can see that.
Because in Lance Hallam, the quality of the scans that we got, Bill, you can see that delicacy. You can see that layering of what he did, which is, one of the reasons why the book was so damn expensive, quite frankly, is like when you're trying to capture that level of granularity of detail in the artist's skill and what he's creating, it takes a level of attention to color and scanning that just, quite frankly, costs a lot of money. But, at the end of the day, ultimately, we have to make the decision about what are we proud to put out in the world. Our names are on it, and we're all hyper nerdy collectors of the guy and his art. And I'd say this, I mean, you're always kind of second guessing like what the right decision is. And this well, right? With all the different things that you are trying and doing and creating. So who knows? All I know is that when I pick that damn book up every day, I am so proud of what we've done. And I think about how much I've had ungodly amounts of fun with Guy and Roger in creating them. And so notwithstanding the economic loss from a utility standpoint, it's off the charts, how much value I derive from those.
Well, that's wonderful. We've talked a lot about the book, but I should note to everybody that's watching on YouTube or Facebook, in the description, there is a link to pre-order the book, which I think pre-orders are going through the 15th of November, but there's also a link that goes over to the Carol Day website where you can still order Lance Hallam as well as a few other products, through that site as well. I think a couple of ebooks that are on there, and a few other things. But you can still get copies of Lance Hallam and pre-order, ASAP, right? Because we have 10 days left for the pre-order window before that closes. And I'll tell you, I was looking at market data on CAF. There was actually an eBay auction in August for a David Wright pinup. I assume, were you guys aware of that? I can't look at the full detail on it. It sold for $3,800.
That was Roger. Yeah,
that was Roger.
That was your okay. Because I can't get in to see who the seller was, unfortunately, because eBay cuts off viewing old auctions like after 30 days, and this was August 5th. So that's nice to see. Was it actually?
Wire got a great deal. I decided no more.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I would think. I didn't think it would have been one of you, because I would have thought something like that would be hard to let go of. But
Well, that was one of the prettiest examples to come to market in a long time. And Roger, as you might guess, has got great taste. And so there were at least two other guys that I know of bidding on that, me and Guy, and didn't do a good enough job, obviously.
Right.
A good enough job.
Oh, so okay. Well, then sorry to hear that.
We should make sure everybody knows that Chris is going to be at OAX at the end of January supporting Bill, and that's going to be. I think we can pretty confidently say that's going to be the biggest exhibition or show of David Wright original art that's ever happened in America. Granted, it's a pretty low bar, but if you've never seen David Wright, if you've never seen his pinups or his sketches or his illustrations or original Carol Days, go see Chris at OAX. And at least you'll see some.
We're really excited. Yeah, we're really excited about OAX. We're going to make sure, Bill, kind of to your question, there's going to be, I'll have a combination of prints of things and then some actual kind of live things, some things that are for sale. But it'll be a broad representation of David's work, going back as far back as I possibly can. And then we'll be selling Lance Hallam live at OAX because we still have copies of that. Slingsby's on a pre-order basis only. But the gist is, in between Hallam, live art, strips, we plan to really, if people want to see this stuff live, it's going to be a ton of fun. And we're super excited about OAX, quite frankly. So, what Roger said is true. He also said it's a low bar in terms of the largest collection.
Well, this is only year one of OAX, but I appreciate that. I think that's going to be, you think about show tabs for cons, right? I have a feeling that our show tab, whatever it may be, and it'll probably go out electronically, is going to be huge for reasons for why to stop by each exhibitor's booth, because everybody's doing something special. And I think that, and I start thinking, that maybe our 7 hours of being open on, on Saturday and Sunday isn't going to be enough, because there's going to be so many things that people are going to want to see almost at every exhibitor's booth, whether it's you bringing Lance Hallam art or David Wright's work that is available or not available, just to see it. I think that's going to be a challenge for a lot of collectors to be able to get through everything. But that's what's going to make OAX really special, I think. And we've got at this point, Kazra and I have at least 2 videographers that'll be filming both days, and we may end up having to add a third person because we've got a few people volunteering, but they're going to have that list as well. We want to document these things that what you're bringing, what you're showing. We've got an artist who's bringing some work that no one's ever seen before from their past, not for sale, just they're like, I want to bring this is going to be special. And it's not a marketing ploy to get you to go to their booth either. They really want to share it. And I think that's fantastic. And it just shows, the passion we as collectors and fans of the medium have for this hobby. And I think that's what OAX is really all about, is that wonderful opportunity to see art, because every collector that comes through the door is going to have a portfolio too. There's just no way. And that's going to be 400 or 500 people carrying around artwork that we're all interested in seeing too. So but yeah, I would encourage everybody who hasn't followed the links over to pre-order the book, please do. And and definitely if you want to pick up a copy of Lance Hallam and you don't want to bring it back on a plane at OAX, buying it through the website's a good idea. But if you're on the fence, you'll have that opportunity to get it at OAX too. Kazra made another question, because Kazra has a publishing background, which is why I'm sure he's got the publishing related questions. He said, given the insane level of front end work, any thoughts on viability timing of a broader market version through a publisher like Fantagraphics to help fund your primary efforts? I mean, that, given the amount of work that goes into it, is that something that you have ever considered, or, is it just, is it more fun as a passion project between the three of you and the team that helps you scan and those sorts of things?
We've thought a lot about that over the years, and we have, and a lot of other people have thought about it too. A lot of publishers, Charles Peltz and other people have been in touch, saying, "Come on, let's do a more of a mass market reprint and so forth." Mm-hmm. And we ended up coming down on the side of basically that is just That's just work that we don't want to do. We decided that what we want to publish and what we want to do is we want to put out the books we want on our shelf personally. And that meant that what we wanted to do mainly is the art books. We don't, we've done a couple of the ebooks to give people a low price point entry into some Carol Day stories and visibility into the art. But frankly, those sell so poorly that not many people are getting any visibility on Carol Day through the ebooks. I can say that. But the bottom line was that, given the amount of money and time and everything else that it takes to get these things done, we decided the biggest priority was the art books, the book that we personally want, not the books that might sell more in the market. I guess the other thing that we've pretty learned is, I think, is that the market for Carol Day books right now is incredibly small. And my guess is, we could do a mass market reprint and we'd only sell 100 copies. It wouldn't be some kind of a 2,000 copy edition that we'd make money on. It would again be a small print run that didn't sell very well, and we end up losing money on. So in the end, we more or less decided if we're going to lose money, we want to do the books that we want.
Right.
And that's what we are.
That makes a lot of sense.
We are.
Do you want to add to that, Chris? You're a much more sophisticated financial guy than I am.
I don't know. I can tell you with all the sophistication, we're definitely losing money. But I would say, that option is always on the table, Bill, but I would say two things. Number one, for this book, Slingsby, it's a sister volume to Hallam, right? So Hallam is Carol as a young woman. Slingsby is Carol as a mature woman. And all of her life experience and what's happened since Hallam gets captured basically in Slingsby. It's really fascinating, mature story about adult romantic relationships. And it kind of pulls in every bit of like other relationship and experience that she's had. So it's kind of, and there's so many kind of echoes basically from Hallam in Slingsby. So my point of that is to let go of control, all artistic control and what people are going to see and read was going to be impossible with this book. I mean, Roger and I and Guy adore this story. There's so much here, so much complexity, both in terms of the art and the storytelling and the layering of it on both fronts, that it was like, we, at the very least, we're going to take it to the finish line in terms of getting this book to market. And I would say, the option to kind of do different things on a going forward basis, always exists. And to Roger's point, people are knocking on the door. I would say this, what is very hard for us to do is, like, as an example, zero interest in some type of like, low quality or lower quality reprint volume that doesn't kind of capture what we think is so important. Because remember, the fundamental thing that we're doing is, this is the art scanned at full color, full size. We want it to be like a collector is holding the board. Guy mentioned 147. We want people looking at the book to be no different than sitting in my living room and holding the 147 and see all that delicacy and layering and stuff that you're just like, I can't believe, because most of the stuff gets washed out, right, in the printing process, paper. Can't believe that this guy put this level of art and craft into what he was doing. We want every collector to experience that. We think that that's a fundamentally important thing about appreciating Wright as an artist and a creator and a storyteller. So no matter what we do, we're going to continue producing books. We love doing that. Now, the format in which they go out into the market, whether that be us or somebody else, it's always on the table. But we're definitely not going to compromise on that aspect, right? That it's full size, which means a big book, a very big, very bulky book that has its own set of complexities and costs associated with it. I mean, we can tell you that part of the cost of the book is when you print at that aspect ratio at that size, like, commercial printers are not set up to do that kind of stuff. You have to pay them to do something really unique and special, and it's a pain in the ass. But I tell you what, again, when you go and you look, I mean, I just can't tell you how happy we are about looking at original art and looking at the book and think that that's what we're putting out in the world. So we'll see. I mean, I think in the grand scheme of things, there's a weird dichotomy where we clearly have done something to impact demand for Carol Day strips because the price of them has skyrocketed in the last, ever since Hallam came out, and even like started poking around the market, price of things has gone up, tenfold. And we think it deserves it. Don't get me wrong, kind of sucks as a collector. But I would say to Roger's point, it doesn't necessarily kind of correlate with demand for the books, and maybe price has a lot to do with that. But to get the quality that we're putting it out, the price is the price. We're not running a commercial printing press. That's for sure. It feels like we are sometimes. Feel like we own one.
Right.
But that I would say on the quality, it's very hard to compromise on that. For Roger in particular, who's seen almost 3,000 examples of these things, just not going to let go of, like, I want to make sure that people understand and appreciate what they're looking at. So as long as it's this quality, we might consider other things, but that's usually you're making trade-offs.
Yeah, I understand that. And I think, if you were ever to do, some kind of a compilation book later on, but that should be after you've done the books that you want to do. Just from a passion project side of things, I think that it makes more sense to get those out before you would ever consider doing something different. Because, when you do that, usually the market demands a soft cover version of the book, and the print quality won't be the same. And that can happen and probably deserves to happen, but it doesn't need to happen now while you guys are tackling the projects as you see their importance.
Yeah, and I would tell you the capstone to Roger's historical stewardship of this whole kind of world is, you see in my name, Chris Kalaki, Slingsby Brothers Inc. We've created an LLC. And so, one of the things that we're doing, I mean, Roger's contributed a tremendous amount of intellectual property to that LLC in the hopes that, what we're doing in terms of they're passion projects. We've really formalized it to kind of capture this stuff in an entity that will survive beyond us. And that's a really, I think, important thing because, quite frankly, the high majority of the intellectual property is Roger's, certainly kind of going back to the family. It speaks volumes about that kind of perfect capstone to what he began 20 years ago, that it's all getting captured in an entity that will hopefully, continue to produce and generate and elevate David Wright, Carol Day, his commercial art, you name it. So we'll see if it all works out that way, but that's what we're trying. That's what we're trying to accomplish. That's for sure. That's what we're trying to accomplish.
Well, I think you've done a fantastic job so far. The Lance Hallam book was amazing. I can't wait to see how the Slingsby Brothers book turns out as well. I mean, I would expect nothing less than what you've already done, and that's an amazing thing. I mean, you've gotten a lot of praise from people out there. Remember, you Felix did a bit on the Lance Hallam book as well. I mean, it's really reached a much broader audience, and all of that contributes to, like you said, the value of the artwork, and just spreading the good word about David Wright and his career. I think that's great. And like I say, I would be shocked if we don't see more projects like this coming out in the next 5 years from other collector groups like your own that have a similar interest and wants to see these artists' legacies maintained. So, or established in this case, because of the fact that they're a European artist and one that we weren't very familiar with here in the States.
Yeah, I mean, look at Michael Finn. Like, he and I were together, and he's doing the same type of thing in Golden Age, which is really, really, really neat, really neat. Hey, one thing I want to mention, because I saw someone mention an interest in a print of what's behind Roger, and this ties back to OAX. So we are actually going to be creating a really special kind of 9-panel print. It's all the wordless panels in Lance Hallam that capture the story. And it's going to be, part of a, kind of, if you buy a book down there type of thing, a giveaway. We'll have them for sale separately. But it might be something that we also make available on our website or through our eBay store. You've got T-shirts and all that kind of stuff. But in the category of that question that someone asked about the background behind Roger, we've actually already created something really special. It'll be will not be seen until OAX, that we think is really cool, Bill. Really cool.
Well, I'm excited about that too. I saw that image. I mean, I think there was something online where it showed even more portraits in it. Yeah, I mean, I was blown away when I saw that. I mean, it was a wonderful image. So if you're doing anything like that with a print, I think it will do well at the show.
No, I did too. I did too.
Fantastic. See, this is, like I said, that show tab for OAX is growing and growing. Kazra and I will have to put that on our list right now to start fleshing out, because like I say, there's going to be a lot on it, but I'm looking forward to seeing it in person, and just getting to getting to hang out with you at the show is going to be a lot of fun. I'm sorry that because Guy and Roger, you're not able to make it to OAX. Is that true? No,
that's true. Although you talk about it, Bill, I'm rethinking.
Oh,
It sounds fun.
Yeah,
I
wish I could have a family wedding.
Well, I mean, there's only one first show, right? But there are more to come. This isn't a one and done for Kazra and I. It is going to be an annual event, but yeah, I think it's going to be a really special event. And if you could make it, Roger, that'd be fantastic. I mean, again, you're somebody who I've emailed with for years, and I love the fact that this became a part of your legacy to the hobby as well. I'd love to get the chance to meet you in person and get to hang out for a little bit if you're at the show.
Hey, Bill, what fascinates me about that show is how many guys, because I've had a lot of conversations with other guys coming down, are bringing their wives. It's fascinating. I mean, it's the first show my wife is ever going to go to, and we're both looking forward to it. And I'm not the only one. Like, there's a lot of couples getting together for dinner, and it's really cool. I don't know why that is, but it's really, I've never seen that phenomenon in terms of this type of a show and couples making it down.
Well, we did make a point early on saying, we even had the couples ticket, right? That was something that we felt. It's in January. It's a place where you could bring a family, even if they didn't want to go to the show with you, they would have something else to do. And so, we felt that it should be an important tenet of the hobby or of the show, and the philosophy behind it is to bring your significant other if you can. That's why several of the artists, Mike and Laura Allred, and Jimmy and Amanda, Adam and Alice, and Andy and Veronica Fish. While that didn't guide us on the idea that we were also trying to find artist couples as well, I mean, it became a part of it. It just because it was so obvious. It's like, well, then we should extend this out to the collector base too, because original art collecting is something you can actually share with your family. Not comic books, Captain America shields. Most of my family members aren't going to care about those things, but original art, I mean, it's something that everybody can relate to. Yeah. So I mean, there's many of us. I mean, my family's going to be there, the whole family's going to be there working one way or another and hanging out, but it's going to be a wonderful aspect of the show. It's going to make the reception all the more fun to be able to be able to hang out with other couples, and also just the idea that, like you said, people planning breakfast, dinners, and things like that, I think are just going to make the event even more interesting and fun for all of us.
Yeah, Kazra says you've got a Spouses of OA Addicts meetup plan. So
yes, in the penthouse with a open bar for the spouses who who need something to do, and that could definitely be arranged.
No.
But I mean, any last things we want to cover? I mean, there's a reminder, the link to pre-order is in the show description. You have another 10 days to do that, so that they can adequately have know what they need to order. Because I'll tell you, advance ordering is incredibly important in the publishing world. Knowing, the more books you can pre-order, the lower the cost is. It really, really, really helps out from a publishing aspect to know that, because a lot of times publishers go into these things blind, over order, under order, and that those things don't work out well. So for those of you considering it, I would strongly encourage you to pre-order the book versus waiting for OAX, because it will help these gentlemen out immensely if you do.
Amen. We appreciate that comment, Bill. Really do. And it's going to be pre-order only. Roger and I cannot have crates or literally crates showing up at our house again. Our wives might actually put us on the front stoop. So,
well, there you go. But listen, guys, this was a lot of fun, and I'll be here to help out in the next 10 days to get the word out to the broader audience of comic art fans as well. But if there's anything else that I can do in the interim, let me know. And I'm just excited to help get the good word out during this period, and then also when we roll into OEX, all the things that you're doing that's going to make that show special. I can't wait to let everybody know about that too.
That's great, Bill. Thank you for all your support. We really appreciate it.
Can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you guys, and thank you everybody for tuning in. This was a lot of fun. We do definitely need to do more shows like this where we get to talk specifically about a single creator with a group of artists that know a lot about that creator more than me. So hopefully, when we look at 2024, shows like this are something that become more the norm. We haven't done enough of these. I mean, honestly, I feel like we only do these like once a year, and that's not right. We need to do more shows like this. So for those of you in the audience who have a passion for an artist, and you have a few other collectors that would love to get on camera and talk about that artist, please email me, bill@comicartfans.com. I'd love to do more shows like this. So thank you guys, and thank you everybody for watching today.
Thanks, Bill.